I'm really curious to learn you mentioned the pitching process to surface good ideas. So I know it's critical for startups. Innovation is the gravity of a lot of things. So how do you do that?
I mean, so in the product teams that I've worked in the past, there's been different ways to do it, and how we do it at Juni is how we do it now, but potentially it'll change. Essentially, what we do for pitches is we have a cross-functional team where it's usually a representative from, product, engineering, design, as well as marketing operations, and anybody can bring a pitch for a given week. Usually, they'll work with the PM slightly beforehand to make sure it's in the right format, they have the right data. Usually, we look for things that are like rough user stories or data on why this is a problem. And so we try to make the pitches very problem based. And then we also have them focus on a potential solution, but there could be multiple solutions for a given problem. So one of the ones that we went through recently was like on our web conversion. We weren't getting as many people clicking on one of the pages as we wanted, I think like the pricing page or something. And there were multiple solutions, everything from like just naming the membership, the pricing page to something else. So that it was clear through to like we need to have CTAs to the website from everywhere. Like there's a lot of different solutions. I think what was great is that it gave the marketing team the muscle to think about how to opportunity size that. And so when they brought in the project, it was more around, hey, like this is the drop off in the funnel, and this is the data that I'm seeing. And then here's like a potential solutions why, because we looked at our full story recording on how people use the page. We also looked at user research, etc. And so that gets like people who are not product people thinking that way as well, which kind of shortens the loop as well. And then we also have engineers bringing in pitches as well. They're sometimes more technical, sometimes more product based. Like we obviously have ones that folks bring in that are like, hey, we need to refactor this part of the code base because there's too much debt, and like we're all slower because of it. I think those are very valid. And then there's also ones that are like, hey, when I was a kid, like I loved using these kinds of code editors or whatever the case is, and like this is the research on why we could focus on something like that. So we try to have cross-functional, and then the PMs work together to prioritize amongst those projects as well. But typically, we keep a really tight planning loop. I've been on teams, and we used to do like a pretty extensive quarterly planning process, but that doesn't really work for a startup. And so we've kind of moved back into doing just 2 cycles forward, or 2 sprints forward planning. And that actually helps people understand like, hey, if my pitch doesn't make it into this cycle, that doesn't mean it won't make it into the next. And that also kind of lowers the bar as well for when somebody should really, really, bring something, because if not, it won't make it in the queue for the next 3 months. Now it's like, hey, if it didn't make it this week, it could still make it in the next 2 weeks or whatever the case is. And that actually also creates a little more fluidity amongst the team and more collaboration, because you got to see every pitch on a weekly basis and understand that there's space, but it has to be the most important thing to work on this cycle.
Got it. Um, a few follow-up questions. Who are doing the pitches? Is everyone in the company, or just specific, like maybe the team lead? And how does the pitch look like? It's in a doc, or just a few minutes for anyone to speak up?
Yes. So technically, it is in a doc. I will say, maybe this is controversial. It's in Notion, but I'm not the hugest fan of Notion. And so, if any listeners have other tool recommendations, I'm all ears as well. But typically, yeah, we have a doc template in Notion where folks kind of put in, all of the good stuff like proposed problem, data backed, and then proposed solution, etc. Typically, we do have mostly the team leads as constituent members of the cross-functional group. But what will happen is that individual members of those teams work with their TLs to kind of go through their pitch, and then the person who actually came up with the pitch also attends that specific pitch meeting if something that they worked on with their TL should get surfaced in that session. So, I think the goal is to not have these pitch meetings be like 40 people. That would probably not be very productive. But the representative, who is usually an IC, will bring a a project that they're pitching, and their TL will be there as well as the other TLs from other teams. So that's typically how we do it to keep it kind of at multiple levels, but also a little more focused.